Will that realignment of the right involve, there's a possibility, put it no higher than that, of a reform attempted takeover of what's left of the Tory party?
Let's wait and see.
I think I might take that as a yes. Any more defections from the Tories to you?
Well, there's all sorts of rumours flying around. I don't give a running commentary, Andrew, even to you.
Oh, now you have become a politician. A running commentary. That's the kind of weasel words politicians
Well, if you think I'm a
use.
politician, then that means actually you think I have got the experience in order to help run things.
Yeah.
You can't have it both ways, Andrew.
Not to run a big department, you don't. Then suddenly the former boss, Nigel Farage, assumed control, and now Richard Tice settled for being chair of the party. He joins me now. Welcome.
Good afternoon.
Now, is it true that you weren't involved in Nigel Farage's decision to take your job as leader? That the first you heard was when he called you on Monday morning and you had to dash back from Skegness for the announcement?
Complete fiction. That article is a catalogue of lies that I've reminded Andrew Pearce. He literally made the whole story up. We've been talking for months about the right way for Nigel to get stuck into the politics. I've been on all sorts of media saying the more help he could give, the better. And we had a plan which Nigel talked about, which was that slightly was sort of wobbled by the Prime Minister calling the election early. One of the reasons was he heard that actually Nigel was about to get stuck back in. So, we had a plan. It had a slight wobble, but we're pushing on. I'm absolutely delighted. And of course, Andrew, this is actually the winning formula that we had back in 2019.
When was the decision taken that Nigel Farage would become the leader again?
So we've been talking about it for weeks.
No, I know that, but when was the decision taken?
So I was urging him and his advisors to say, look...
But when was the decision taken?
The decision ultimately was, we were talking about it on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, but it had to be his decision because it's a very personal decision.
Let me try again. When was the decision taken?
He said, I'm prepared to do this on Sunday.
It was on Sunday?
So that's right. He said he was prepared to do it on Sunday, and so we called a press
conference. And it was
conference.
his decision.
He
called the shots.
No one else could fall. It was not a question of calling the shots. We had agreed a plan, but ultimately he had to make the decision. Yep, I'm going to go for it, and that's great. Look at the response we had.
So you knew on Sunday night.
I knew way before.
Why did you go to Skegness?
I wasn't in Skegness. I'm sorry. That article was a catalogue of lies.
You weren't there at all.
I wasn't there. I was in London. I left Skegness on Saturday. Ben Habib wasn't at the meeting on Monday. That article is the greatest catalogue of lies.
Well, let me give you a chance to put a couple of other things straight then. I read that Reform is not a party but a limited company, that Nigel Farage owns 53% and you have 33%. Is that true?
That is true. We are a limited company. There are other parties. I mean, the Tory party has a company. The point is,
Nigel Farage had the majority. He had the votes.
Democracy
53%.
Democracy at the ballot box. And the reason that we've been able to move so quickly from 0% in the polls to early to mid-teens is because we've been able to move at great speed over the last 3 years. I'm incredibly proud of what we've achieved to date. And now we're moving forward. And we're giving tens of millions of voters the opportunity to look at our policies, debate them and say, yeah, actually, I like that. And I think we've got a cracking chance of getting as many or more votes than the Tory party.
We'll come on to that in your policies a bit. Just one more thing just to tidy up the party issues. Have you loaned Reform £1.4 million?
No, that's it's an incorrect figure. I mean, this article is
How
such
much
a joke.
have you?
1.1 million. It's all out there in the public domain.
So it's 1.1?
It's 1.1, that's right.
It's not far out there. Do you think you'll ever...
About 30% out.
Will you ever see... Well, it's not that much for a man of your means. Will you ever see that money back?
Well, let's wait and see. There's a number of options. But the real point is, with my seed funding for this party, we have grown from 0 to the mid-teens, something no one else has done. I'm incredibly proud of that achievement. And now we've got the platform to move ahead, get seats, and I'm convinced we're going to get seats and millions of votes.
Let's look at what that might result in. Now, with Nigel Farage back at the helm, Reform is, many people think, likely to take even more votes from the Tories. Yeah. Are you concerned that as a result, Labour will win such a big majority, and probably for 2 terms, that rejoining the European Union could soon be back on the agenda?
Look, I'm concerned that both of the main 2 parties represent actually the same policies. The highest taxes for 70 years, the highest government spending. No, Andrew,
I didn't ask you about that. I said, are you concerned that Labour could win so strongly that the
Andrew,
EU
I've just replied,
is
I'm
back
concerned
on the
about
agenda?
Both of those main parties. And no, Labour won't rejoin the EU in the front door. But the truth is that Conservatives haven't properly left the EU. They've remained attached to all of the regulations. They haven't cut taxes as with the opportunity. They haven't controlled the borders as with the opportunity. And they've left Northern Ireland attached to the EU. So there's no difference between the two. They're a disaster for the country. There's no growth whatsoever.
I don't think, in the unlikely event the Tories win, they're going to attempt to take us back into the EU. But let me ask you this. If Labour win, you don't think so, even with a big majority and clearly in for 2 terms?
Well, they said 2 terms with Boris with an 80-seat majority.
Sure, but if they were
things change. Things change when actually the recession continues, when people get poorer per person, when public services get worse, people get quite upset very quickly.
So when anti-Labour politicians say, don't vote Labour, they're going to take us back into the EU, we have the chairman of the Reform Party saying that's not true.
I think what they'll do is they will remain wedded to the EU regulations, many of which are unnecessary.
But
I think they'll remain wedded to the tax structure. Okay. I don't think they'll try and join.
Let's look at some of your tax and spend policies. There's a lot of them. You plan to spend more than Jeremy Corbyn did in 2019. You plan to cut taxes by a lot more than Liz Truss attempted in 2022.
And we set out how we're going to pay for them and save money, Andrew,
and the result
unlike everybody else.
Well, let's just go through that, because if you add it all up, it would blow an incredible 140 billion black hole in the national finance.
There's no black hole. No, Andrew,
the
there's
bond markets would have you for breakfast.
Nonsense, Andrew, because if you read the document, then you can clearly see there's also 146 billion of savings out there.
But they're fantasy savings.
No, they're not, Andrew. Right? If you start with scrapping net zero, that's costing at least 30 billion a year.
No, net zero is 30 billion over 6 years.
Absolute nonsense. It's 3 trillion over 30 years, Andrew.
No, that's to 2050.
Yes, well,
we're only talking to 2030. The net zero cost is 30 billion between now and 2030. That's 6 billion a year.
No, Andrew,
so you have another 134 billion to
Andrew,
find.
I'm sorry, that's completely wrong. It's 30 billion a year that is costing the taxpayer because of net zero, right? If you look at the Climate Change Committee's figures, you look at the National Grid's figures, they are in the trillions between now and 2050, and that money is being spent now. The second
point...
But
that's till 2050. You're talking about making savings now.
Yeah, and Andrew, the money's being spent now. Every year,
not
the
trillions.
Not
trillions. You're about to spend it.
Andrew,
Look,
in the figures, we've allocated 30 billion, which is being spent by the public sector on net zero every year at least, and no one has counted it. The second key spending, Andrew, is that the Bank of England is voluntarily paying base rate interest on all the QE reserves that other central banks are not doing. That's about 35 billion this year. It was about 20 billion last year, on top of the unnecessary quantitative tightening they did of another 50 billion pounds. These are serious monies
that are being... There are real problems about doing what you propose in the Bank of England, but it's quite a technical matter, so I'm going to let that pass for now. And
I'll tell you now, I'm not going to let it pass, Andrew, because 2 former deputy governors...
I am.
I'm talking about it because you've accused me of not having savings, and I'm telling you 2 former deputy governors...
And I'm saying that these savings are not credible.
They're
because
completely
you're
credible.
Changing the debt relationship with the banks who get this money, and for a government that's going to have to borrow a ton of money, it's not a sensible thing to do.
If you don't believe me, what about believing 2 former deputy governors of the Bank of England, Charlie Bean and Sir Paul Tucker? What about believing Patrick Minford, the economist? What about believing the New Economics Foundation? What about believing Robert Peston, another very
Minford is the one economist that agrees with you. Another thing that you've done... Something that's easier for our listeners to understand is you've got 50 billion savings in waste. It's the old chestnut of all politicians that don't know how to cut. They say, we're going to save on waste and inefficiency and so on. None of you has ever been in government. You have no idea how to cut 50
but I tell you what, we have
waste.
We're people who have got a successful track record of running big businesses, right, making profits for shareholders. We know how to get stuff done, we know how to fix things, and we know how to save money. And when I talk about the savings, I always get phoned up or emailed by doctors and nurses who says the waste in the NHS is extraordinary. It's legendary. It's so great. And in other states, you can see it and sense it. And we are heading towards... There is no growth in the economy over the projections. And if we don't change course, last year alone, Andrew, right, we spent about 120 billion more than the government had. If we don't change course and get some serious growth in the economy, we are heading towards disaster. We're saying you've got to save some money in the back office and invest it in the front office. That's what we do.
Right. And of course, it's growth as well. That's the other thing politicians always say, we'll pay it with more economic growth. But that I'm sorry, but the bond markets are not going to go through with your idea that you can identify 50 billions in savings, because they know you can't, and you can't do it quickly enough. And they're also not going to bet that you will magically conjure up strong growth to pay for all this. So there'll be a run on sterling.
And if you look at my
hold on, let me finish the question. There'll be a run on sterling,
Andrew,
and there'll be a run on the bond markets.
Nonsense.
That's what will happen, because you're a bunch of amateurs when it comes to economics.
Absolute nonsense. We're a bunch of very successful people who've identified where the government is wasting money unnecessarily.
You've never run an economy or a government department.
No one in the Treasury.
Have you?
No, Andrew, no one in the Treasury or the government or the Bank of England has countered me on this QE reserves point. It's really significant, and that's because I'm right and they're embarrassed about it. Okay?
Have you ever run a government department?
The point is, we're successful business people who've got a track record of success.
Running a business and running government, as you know, are two entirely different things.
And Andrew,
indeed. The track record of business people in government is very poor. You know that.
Actually,
Name me.
again, completely wrong. Yes, Lord Young, Margaret Thatcher's cabinet
he was
cabinet
given
minister,
a specific task by
and was
Margaret
very good at
Thatcher.
Okay, so you say, so let's look at Jeremy Hunt, the current Chancellor. If he's so brilliant because he's run lots of government departments, how come the health service is in such a catastrophic
He's a
state?
businessman.
Right? No, he's been a politician for many, many years.
He ran businesses. He's the kind of politician.
He's
that
found. You can't have it both ways, Andrew.
I just did.
No, you can't have. Right? He's then running the Treasury, and the reality is we're not getting the growth.
I mean, if you're going to be a credible party, you have to come up with something that's a kind of better than Corbynista stuff on the right.
Andrew,
I mean, it's just
no
a
other
joke.
party has set out at the savings there. No other party has
Because
said...
your savings are not credible.
They're completely credible.
Nobody believes them.
Well, Andrew, why hasn't the Bank of England then denied the fact that we
It
could
is
change that?
not the purpose of the Bank of
Well, then
England
why hasn't anybody in
to
the
get
Conservative
into
Party
Come on.
or the Treasury?
That shows
Because
the
they know it's
naivety
true.
of reform.
Nonsense.
You expect the Bank of England to get involved in political debate in an election campaign.
So why
Richard
haven't
Tice, you know better than that.
Andrew, I've been talking about this for 18 months and no one has countered it because it's true and because two former deputy governors of the Bank of England agree with me.
The Bank of England does not get involved in political debate. You know that.
If the former governors had said that I was wrong, that's different. Actually, they've agreed with me.
All right, let's go. Okay, you made that point 4 times, but let's move on.
Because it's an important point.
No, okay, so you've made it 4 times, don't make it 5. If the Tories suffer a wipeout, which could be on the cards, and reform may well contribute to that, would you regard them as vulnerable to a hostile takeover by reform?
Look, I think the reality is they are not they're not a real Conservative party. There needs to be a party of the centre, right?
So would you take them over?
Well, the reality is we are there, and we think that there will be a significant realignment of the right post the election,
right?
And deservedly so, because at the moment, right, apart from us, there is nothing. The Tory party are socialist, like the Labour Party.
I understand
They're
that.
left of centre. So there will be a realignment of the right.
And
I'm confident of that.
I understand, but will that realignment of the right involve, there's a possibility, but no higher than that, of a reform attempted takeover of what's left of the Tory party?
Let's wait and see.
I think I might take that as a yes. Any more defections from the Tories to you?
Well, there's all sorts of rumours flying around. I don't give a running commentary, Andrew, even to you.
Oh, now you have become a politician. A running commentary. That's the kind of weasel words politicians
Well, if you think I'm a politician,
use.
then that means actually you think I have got the experience in order to help run things.
Yeah.
You can't have it both ways, Andrew.
Not to run a big department, you don't. But anyway, I've enjoyed that. It's good to see you.
Nice to see you.
Richard Tice, Reform of UK Chair now, not leader, but Chair, still important position, and 33% shareholder. Is that right? 33? You should buy a bit more and you could vote Nigel Farage out. Actually, I'm being told we've just been given a little bit more time.
They are because we're talking sense.
So what would success look like?
Millions of, I'll tell you.
How many seats do you... Because the voting system is obviously right against you. How many seats do you think you could get?
Well, first of all, what we think we can get is many millions of votes, and the objective is to get close to or as many as the Conservative Party. And we think that would be a huge success. And let's wait and see. We've got the voting system. It is what it is. So we know it's difficult, but if you don't try, you've got no chance. We're out there. We're going up in the polls. Something is happening out there. It's extraordinary. Everybody's saying it. Everybody's talking about reform. I think we're going to surprise a lot of people on the upside.
Is there not a risk that you could get quite a lot of votes, but you only maybe get 1 seat, and it's called Clacton?
The biggest risk in life is never taking one, Andrew. And that's absolutely, of course, quite possible. In which case, I actually think that the British people will say our voting system is patently unfair. Something's got to change. and that then becomes a more central part of the debate, and I think that's a good thing.
But if Labour wins by a landslide, I can assure you the voting system is not going to change.
But it's important to talk about these things. That's how things work in a democracy, Andrew. You debate stuff, you look at it, and then the British people say, actually put pressure on politicians to achieve certain things. And if people think that their vote is not equal, that's a terrible place to be.
Right, but I still don't see how the change comes about. We were told yesterday that if the Tory party is reduced to a rump, what's left of it in Parliament will be probably more One Nation, more centrist Tory than the party is at the moment. Doesn't that make a takeover more difficult? Because they're not going to like you or the Reform Party.
I think that is correct, that it'll be more One Nation. We're hearing that the way they're fixing their candidate selection this week is to keep real Conservatives out. No, actually what it means is there's more likely to be a realignment of the right with the remaining real Conservatives in the Tory party, much more likely to realise the game's up in the Conservative Party and they will defect to Reform and we become the real party of the centre-right as the Tories end up sort of floundering around just to the left of middle somewhere with, frankly, no real policies that anybody wants to support.
If the Tories were to choose a right-winger after this election, after losing, would that make a merger more likely than a hostile takeover?
Well, let's wait and see. That's
they
the least likely.
Like Suella Braverman.
Well, that's the least likely.
Patel.
Because of what you've just said about the majority being One Nations, that's the least likely to happen.
Well, it could be the party activists that will choose. I mean, they lumbered the party
for that to happen, as you well know, the MPs have got to put two candidates to the membership, and the chance of them putting a someone from the right will significantly diminish if they've got a much greater hold of the parliamentary Conservative Party. So that's much, much less likely, which is why the realignment of the right is, I'm sure, on the cards.
Are you so a realignment of the right along the populist lines of America, along the populist lines of France, where it's taking place with Madame Le Pen, along the lines of Madame Meloni in Italy? Is that what you're looking for in Britain?
We're the United Kingdom. Let's focus on our own politics rather than compare ourselves to others. I think we've got a new opportunity, and that's a good thing. These things come along every 50 to 100 years, and I think we're approaching that moment as towards the end of this election.
Richard Tice, we will watch this space. Thank you for your time.